GMT.
Vielleicht nur als Symphosan.
Hello and welcome to WION live broadcast from London. I'm Oliver Regan and these are the headlines. India lodges a strong protest with the United States over State Department's recent comments concerning the arrest of Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal, summons a US diplomat and hands over a strongly worded démarche. Eighth suspect in Moscow attack appears in court. Rights Commissioner warns of torture after suspects show signs of physical scars while pre-trial court appearances. Israeli army shares new footage of perpetrated multiple strikes on Lebanon's Hezbollah infrastructure. Thousands of Hungarian protesters call on Chief Prosecutor and Prime Minister Viktor Orban to resign after a former government insider accused a senior aide of Orban to try and interfere in a graft case. Thailand's the lower house passes a bill giving legal recognition to same-sex marriage, pushing the country one step closer to marriage equality. The bill still needs approval from the Senate and royal endorsement to become law. Major Japanese pharmaceutical firm orders nationwide recall of a dietary supplement for lowering cholesterol amid concerns it could be linked to 2 deaths and more than 100 hospitalizations. The UK's National Health Service is witnessing record low public satisfaction. A new survey claims just 24% of respondents are satisfied with the NHS in 2023. The poll, conducted by the National Centre for Social Research, has been running since 1983. In 2010, the percentage points reached its highest at 70%. 14 years later, as of today, the public's view of the health service is down by an enormous 46% from its peak. According to British Social Attitude Survey, 52% of respondents are dissatisfied with the NHS, and the satisfaction with social care has fallen to 13%. Both the findings are the lowest since the survey began. The National Centre for Social Research polled more than 3,000 people across England, Wales and Scotland. Most of the respondents said that it takes too long to get a general physician or hospital appointment. Staff shortages at NHS is the second most cited reason, followed by low government spending on the National Health Service. The state of the NHS is one of the key topics in the upcoming general election. According to a poll by Ipsos, the majority of Britons identified the state of the NHS as one of the daunting issues facing the country. The General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing, Pat Cullen, says voters must now make the NHS and care services as the central issue of the general election. Meanwhile, a spokesperson from the Department of Health and Social Care claims that progress is being made, while adding that the government is slowly achieving its goal of reducing the waiting list. Well, for more on this, we're joined by our correspondent Julia Chapman from London. Julia, we know just how important the NHS is to voters in the UK. Just give us a sense of the significance of this poll and its implications in this long-awaited general election.
Well, certainly health is going to be a major voting issue when it comes to the elections that we're expecting later on this year. It's something that many people have an interaction with and something they want to see the highest standards for, to ensure that they can trust that their health is in good hands. Now, this is a pretty stark look at how people are feeling about the National Health Service here in the UK. As you say, the lowest figure of satisfaction since this poll began in 1983. Just 24% of people are satisfied with the health service offered by the United Kingdom government, something that is funded by taxpayers in this country. And that comes after a record high back in 2010, which was when the Conservatives came into power. It's also a pretty stark fall since the COVID era. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has a lot to do with some of these problems in the health service. We've seen a big drop in satisfaction since 2020, and it isn't looking like it's going to recover anytime soon as the health service continues to be plagued by issues, by delays, by long waiting times, and now, of course, by strike action as well. We have seen long-running strikes in the NHS, which have pushed up waiting times. We've seen doctors, nurses, ambulance staff as well taking to the picket lines over the last couple of years as a cost of living crisis bit in this country. Many of those groups have resolved their disputes with the government and have seen a modest increase in their pay, but we're seeing junior doctors, who account for about 50% of the workforce of the NHS, still continuing to strike. As we speak, we're hearing that there will be another strike going forward. They've secured an extension to the ballot of junior doctors, having gone on strike already 10 times over the past year. They're calling for a really significant pay rise, saying that a lack of good pay is part of the problem with the NHS. They are saying that there are people leaving the health service, going into private medicine, going to other countries as well, and all of that is having a knock-on effect on the patients that are struggling to get appointments. We've seen waiting times at record highs a few months ago. They have come down since then, but those who are waiting for an appointment for more than 18 months, or rather for treatment for longer than 18 months, that number is still growing. In the last recorded month, in February, that number was 14,000 people. That's something the government has vowed to abolish, making sure that there is nobody having to wait that long for treatment. They haven't managed to do that just yet. And as I say, voters will certainly be thinking about those kinds of considerations as they decide who to cast their ballot for in elections we're expecting later this year.
Julia Chapman, many thanks there for that insight. Now, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government has faced a double blow after 2 Tory ministers resigned. With this, the troubled PM will be now forced to carry out a mini reshuffle of his junior rank ministers. Veteran MP Robert Halfon announced that he would step down as Education Minister and would be leaving the House of Commons at the next general election. The Armed Forces Minister James Heappey also confirmed that he had left his role at the Ministry of Defence. Heappey had already made his intentions of leaving the office public before officially standing down. The pair join a growing exodus of Conservative MPs from the House of Commons as the party languishes in the polls. Opposition leader Keir Starmer's Labour Party is widely expected to form the government after the election, which is expected this autumn. Halfon becomes the 63rd Tory MP to say that he will not stand in the next general election. Former PM Theresa May and the former Cabinet Minister Brandon Lewis confirmed their departures in recent weeks. 4 former Conservatives who now sit as independents are also leaving. This means that over a fifth of the Tory MPs elected in 2019 are quitting. Sunak carried out a mini reshuffle of the junior ministerial ranks as a result of the departures, moving the MP Nus Ghani to the Foreign Office, while Leo Doherty returned to the Ministry of Defence to take over as Armed Forces Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about the rest last year when everyone else in the public sector had a public sector pay freeze. Mr. Speaker, we're already investing...
Israeli forces claim to have killed a Hamas deputy military commander in an Israeli strike. Hamas commander Marwan Issa was at the top of Israel's most wanted list. Israel claims Issa was the head of Hamas's military wing. Mohammed Deif and Yawan Sinwar planned the October 7th attack on southern Israel. The Israeli army also released a video claiming multiple strikes on Hezbollah infrastructure in Lebanon. The targets included a military compound and weapons storage facility in Hanin and terrorist infrastructure in Beit Yahun. Meanwhile, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh met with Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and Ayatollah Khamenei reportedly expressed Iran's support for the Palestinian people in Gaza. This is his second visit to Iran since the outbreak of the war. The visit comes after the United Nations Security Council adopted a resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire. The Iranian Foreign Ministry says that the resolution is a positive step. Israel says the resolution by UNSC has hindered the hostage talks as Tel Aviv criticised Washington's decision not to deploy its veto over the measure. However, the US says its ally Israel's statement is inaccurate and unfair.
We believe that a full-scale military operation in Rafah will not just cause civilian harm to the Palestinian people, it will not just hinder the flow of humanitarian assistance, most of which is coming in through the Rafah area and being distributed initially through Rafah. We believe that that kind of operation would hurt Israel's national security. It will leave Israel more isolated in the world.
Well, Miller also added that a ceasefire and release of hostages ultimately will have to be secured through negotiation. Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant is in the United States for a series of meetings. There he says that neither Israel nor Hamas will rule the Gaza Strip after the current war ends, while adding that there is a need of building a local alternative. While meeting his counterpart, US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin said civilian casualties in Gaza are too high as the leaders discussed alternatives of an expected operation in Rafah. Well, for more on this, we're joined as ever by our correspondent Jody Cohen. And Jody, can the Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant actually get US-Israel ties back on an even keel? That's obviously while he's in Washington for those meetings.
Hi, Oliver. So there's a difference in policy between Israel and the Biden administration when it comes to Rafah. Now, when I say Israel, I don't just mean Netanyahu's coalition. That's because almost the whole of the Israeli political spectrum supports the military experts who suggest that the only way to fully target the last Hamas battalions and destroy the Hamas tunnels is through a ground operation in Rafah. And remember, if Hamas survives, they have said that they're going to carry out more 7th of October style massacres against Israel again and again. Now, the other key issue between the Biden administration and Israel is how the UN Security Council vote calling for a ceasefire is affecting the hostage talks. As you said, the Biden administration believes that it hasn't had an impact on the hostage talks. Israel believes that the vote is what led Hamas to reject the proposal that was on the table, and that Hamas is convinced that international pressure will lead to a ceasefire, and that would mean Hamas's survival and that the 134 Israeli hostages would still be left in Gaza. Now, again, it comes back to Rafah. The Israeli government believes that military pressure is what will lead Hamas to negotiate seriously and release the hostages. In the meantime, the Biden administration officials have been meeting with Israeli Defense Minister Gallant in Washington. They've been discussing the US's alternative ideas to a ground operation, and it remains to be seen if Israel agrees with their assessment.
Well, the US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin has said that too many people are dying in Gaza and not enough aid is getting in. What's Israel saying about any suggested solutions?
Right, so Israel has said that every civilian death is a tragedy, but said that the responsibility lies with Hamas, who started the war and is hiding behind civilians. While Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin has said that too many people are dying, US war expert John Spencer has said that the civilian to combatant casualty ratio in this war is actually the best in military history, and has indicated that the Biden administration is not talking about that for domestic or electoral purposes. Now, on aid, Israel has said that there's no limit to the amount of aid that's getting in. They said that they're doing 4-hour daily pauses in the fighting to enable distribution. But that the UN, they say, is getting their information from Hamas, which is recognised as a terror organisation by several countries. That the UN is blaming Israel to cover up for the UN's failures, including that Israel says that the UN agency for the Palestinians, UNRWA, is a front for Hamas. Now, Gallant has suggested that Israel is working with influential Palestinian families, groups and businessmen to secure aid convoys and stop Hamas stealing the aid. He's also said that Israel sees these Palestinians governing Gaza after the war, not Israel and not Hamas.
Our correspondent Jodie Cohen joining us live there. Many thanks. Lawmakers in the United Kingdom have called for a much greater pace of investment in defence spending. Additionally, they have warned that the military needs more money for munitions and anti-missile systems. This development comes after the UK's Deputy Chief of Defence Staff warned that Britain could not fight Russia for more than 2 months. This, keeping in mind the current resources of the country. Lieutenant General Robert McGowan said that the armed forces would have to manage the operational risk that came with not having the resources for future wars. He further asserted on how the UK will not be able to fight Vladimir Putin for more than a couple of months in a full-on shooting war. The comments come after the UK's Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, spoke with MPs. Shapps said that he had lobbied Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt for more money to be spent on defence in the recent budget. However, he failed to secure an increase as initially sought by him. Echoing similar concerns, the senior Royal Marines officer said that the amount of money which is being spent on munitions at the moment does not meet in all areas and the threat that the country faces. These comments come after a damning inquiry by the Commons Defence Committee. It outlined that Britain's increasingly overstretched armed forces were not ready for a potential war with Russia. The report highlighted how the armed forces require more funding to engage in operations, so it would have to reduce the operational burden on the military. The British Museum has dragged a former curator to court on Tuesday. The museum has accused the ex-employee of stealing hundreds of artefacts and putting them on sale online. Peter Higgs was fired in July 2023 after over 1,800 items went missing. A London court has ordered Higgs to provide a list of all the items he is suspected of lifting and return the ones still in his possession. The loss of artefacts also led to the exit of the museum's director in August 2023. Lawyers for the museum have said, and I'm quoting here, that Higgs abused his position of trust. The court has been able to recover 356 of the missing items so far. Higgs was the curator of ancient Greek collections, and he's under police investigation, but has fallen short of being charged. Meanwhile, Higgs has also filed a defence against the charges, but was not present for Tuesday's hearing. As per the museum's lawyers, Higgs covered his tracks by using fake names and creating false documents, manipulating the museum's records and selling artefacts at less than their value. However, it is important to note that most of these artefacts do not originally belong to the UK. These range from Egyptian mummies and ancient Greek statues to scrolls bearing 12th century Chinese poetry, and even masks created by the indigenous peoples of Canada. The 18th Century Museum is one of Britain's biggest tourist attractions and has a footfall of more than 6 million a year. An Indian student in the UK has alleged that he has been the victim of a hate campaign. Satyam Surana, who's currently pursuing law at the London School of Economics, says a well-planned hate and smear campaign was launched against him as he stood for the student union elections. Surana has said he's been labelled a fascist by his opponents, who have linked him with India's ruling Bharatiya Janata Party. While he campaigned for the post of General Secretary, his posters were ripped off, torn and defaced in the campus. He said that messages were doing rounds in which the groups of university said were very seditious and contentious of the Indian government. Surana added that even though his manifesto had no political points and only the issues related to the campus, he was linked to Indian politics. Some of his posts on social media were also used in this regard. Surana has come to the limelight earlier as well. Last year he made it to the headlines when he defiantly picked up a tricolour off the ground during an attack on the Indian High Commission in the UK by Khalistani elements. Surana says he's been targeted by his opponents in the campus for calling Khalistani radicals as terrorists in one of his posts. The LSE elections are now over and Surana could not go past the finish line despite gathering enough support in his initial phase of campaigning. He believes he was not randomly targeted and was victim to a well-planned anti-India campaign.
Some of my tweets wherein I had just praised the central government for some laws and in some recent incidents. Then they put up my tweets that he is praising Narendra Modi, so he is a part of BJP and he is a fascist person as well.
Two contenders for this summer's Euros played out a thrilling 2-2 draw in a friendly. Real Madrid's Jude Bellingham scored a last-gasp equaliser against Belgium, which ensured England avoided a second successive defeat at Wembley. Three Lions head coach Gareth Southgate made 5 changes to the side that lost to Brazil